Nicolas is a senior machine learning scientist and AI innovation and strategy lead in Nokia. And he's working with AI-driven innovation at Nokia Bell Labs. He was the winner of the 2 last global conferences on AI organized by Nokia Bell Labs, a distinguished member of the technical staff and a recognized leading inventor. Initiator, technical lead and strategist of Nokia's AI for broadband troubleshooting program, Nicolas will talk about teaching machines and application to broadband. Welcome, Nicolas. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Marta. I hope everyone can hear me well. So thanks everyone for having organized this event, quite challenging in these days, and I'm very happy to be there. So to start a conference on AI, usually I like to do a kind of refresh about what is AI, intelligence. And when we look at the definition, we can rapidly see that it mentioned in many ways, but you can see logic, understanding, learning aspects are important. And more generally, we can in fact summarize intelligence in the ability to perceive or infer information and to retain this as knowledge. So all nice words, but it comes from Wikipedia. So when we apply that to artificial intelligence, a nice illustration is, for example, autonomous car, autonomous driving. And in these aspects, there are on the right of the picture, a first aspect about the sensor, the capability to extract information. And later on, that's more on the left, to combine these information in order to execute an action. So there are actually two aspects. First is perceiving information, extracting the information. And the second one, it's more combining this information. And of course, us human, we can do that, but it's difficult to explain how we can do that. So when we look at the image, the pattern that are recognized for identifying pedestrian or car, it may be difficult to explain that we look at shape, at color, at edges, whatever movement, in order to explain why we suddenly brake or turn left, turn right. So that's already a form of intelligence, and already in the teaching, in the software design aspect, there is a nice learning process and a nice advantage of using machine learning aspect. Now, if we look even deeper, and for example, these robots that are now on Mars, it's difficult to say that we can do it because it has never been done. So these robots, they are able to, of course, travel, to not walk, but to roll all over this new planet. But all of these robot has been pre-trained, or at least as a knowledge that has been acquired, but not from field data, for example, because the field was not really available before. Now, there are also other aspects like having living portraits on the bottom left, where it's difficult also for a human to be able to reproduce that. So now the machines can do it, and there is an advantage of using AI to help human in doing that. And of course, if we move to genomics or more fundamental science, there the knowledge even do not exist. So we use AI to help us in identifying a new knowledge. And last but not least, when there is a knowledge, but where it's very complex, like in a stock exchange, so massive amount of data to process in order to take a decision, there is also an advantage of using AI. So all in all, just to summarize, we are able, like driving a car, to do it. And there was a kind of paradigm saying in the 16th that if we can do it, probably the machine can do it as well. And let's try to mimic how the brains works, because we are able to do that. So let's propose a mathematical model close from how the brain would work. And that was the proposal, it's not new, of neural networks. So this emergence of model where you have more or less interconnection of data, and these interconnection finally are processed in a neuron, and an output is produced. And then another layer of neuron is designed. There as well, there are connections, processing of information and transfer to the next layer. So basically, it mimics how a simple brain works and how information are transferred from one layer to the other. So at the early stage, it was like deep neural networks or fully connected neural networks where every neuron is connected to other. Now in the brain, there are regions, not every neuron is connected to every other. So there was a proposal done at Bell Labs in the 19th of having convolutional neural networks. So convolution, it's like signal processing system. A system can be mathematically summarized by a convolution operation. But also if we look more in the structure of this network, there are layers. Not every neuron is attached to the other, and there is some function. So more in-depth layer extract some core pattern, and then it's forwarded and forwarded over and over in order to combine this pattern and at the end address the problem that we were to solve. So I will not here redo the theory of deep learning or neural networks, but just to emphasize that in this model, there are quite a lot of weights that will need to be updated. And in state-of-the-art neural networks, like Google Inception, there it's even summarized even more. You have here layer with various operations, like convolution and pooling. And then there are a lot of layers and a lot of weights to be updated. And what does it mean? A lot of weights, big model will require a lot of data in order to train them. So even if these techniques in the 16th were existing and were proposed, the hardware, the machine need to follow in order to be able to train these very deep neural networks. And we can see that more advanced is the neural net, more data you will need. And then a huge data set will need to be proposed. Now, in a training process, usually when we would like to train a system, error is of course important. So usually we have a classical error. In this case, it's a very simple one, but there is an effort that is done in designing a correct error, and that will define a bit the network, the error map, sorry, here. Now, the goal of the machine learning process, and as I mentioned of this model, is to update these weights in order to learn really the mapping between the inputs and finally the outputs. But what usually we forget is that the inputs themselves enter into this formula. And actually the inputs themselves will define also the objective, and the inputs themselves will even define the error map. So if you have not a complete data set, if you have bias in your inputs, and I will illustrate that quite deeply after that, that will also bias all the conclusion that you will have. And in summary, it's kind of finally easy to arrive to have a good accuracy, to kind of easy to apply techniques to minimize the error, but it's not easy to have a system that is really working live in production. So easy to have high accuracy, all the weights will adjust in order to match that, but not easy at the end to have a system that really bring value and that really is working live. And that's a bit the fundamental topic of this presentation. So machine learning, it's more or less like teaching a machine. And teaching a machine, it's not very far from us human when we are learning. So teaching human. And we can have this analogy with the library. So the data set, the training set can be seen as a library. And of course it has a size, it's kind of big, and that's the amount of shelf. And when I said, when there is a deep neural network, there are a lot of weights, you need a lot of data, it's actually not enough. You can have a lot of data, but that will not really help to solve your problem, to have your robots that is working in production. So we need to actually fill the library with the right books in order to learn something accurate and something efficient. So each book can be seen as the sample. And first, you need to select the book. So it's not just good to have the sample or the books that are there. Are these books existing? So is there a book, if you would like to send a rover on Mars, are there books that are explaining how to drive on Mars? Probably not. So just for the feasibility study and also to define the solution of the problem, we need to have the books, so the example addressing the subject that we would like to address. Of course, the title can be seen as the label, and what is inside the book can be will affect actually the accuracy. We can say things that are wrong, things that are exactly correct in a book that will define the accuracy. The variety of books within a subject will define the robustness. It's nice to have one book for one topic, but having a variety of books describing the topic will address more completely the subject. And then you have the different type of books having different topics. So not only having books, I don't know, on cats, but having also books on dogs help to have finally more coverage of the problem for the animals. The balance as well is important. So having only books about cats and very few about dogs introduce a bias. And that bias will also be transferred into the system that you would like to train. So finally, the bias, the precision and recall also is affected by this balance between example. And finally, the time it takes to read all that books is more or less seen as the training process and the time it takes to train your system. And if you go for online learning, we will see that after active learning, then it's like reading books on the fly. It will take time just to have your knowledge that get acquired. So reading books like training process. In general, deep learning based system, if we move now, if we translate that analogy from the library to really deep learning based system will require large data set. Fine, I already mentioned that, but it has to contain very informative and pertinent data. So it has to be accurate and relevant, preferably containing various accurate and reliable labels and targets, of course. And that's important, with a wide variety within the example for the same categories. So if we would like to address well a problem, having a lot of variety, and even in the latent space, so at the stages of the feature map, it's even more important. The balance is also very important, as I said. So having examples that are correctly and optimally balanced is the key. And even in the latent space. So not always balanced between just the label and the categories, but also between the latent space feature map that you have. It's important. Of course, these examples need to be representative and realistic. So now let's explore. It's nice to mention what we require, how to have that. And usually in terms of data strategy, first option is the labeling campaign. Let's annotate data. So it's usually the first proposed option, but it relies only on existing and available data. You cannot annotate data that are not existing. You need to rely on what is available. And it involves, of course, unusually human in the loop. So that already introduce some drawbacks. So first, the data set might be a problem. Annotating millions or billions of data, it's a problem. And you only annotate what you have. So if you don't have data or for some aspect of the problem, you cannot well label them, annotate them. So already coverage problem that can occur. And of course, it's linking to the human capabilities. We are in the telecommunication domain. Sometimes signals are very complex and difficult. A human cannot clearly annotate these signals. So finally, you cannot perform a nice labeling. And finally, the capabilities of your system get linked to the capabilities of what human can do. So ML systems that are trained based on these techniques usually suffer or may suffer from a lack of coverage, accuracy, and robustness. And even some parts, some use case might not be addressed because human in that case were not able to label the picture. Active learning, so for example, learning for ongoing existing data, for example, traffic in cities, why not? Fine, another strategy. And it involves few extra resources than next to the data itself. So in this case, there are just sensors that measure the traffic and count the vehicle in the different street, plus the coordinates, GPS coordinates, and that's it. No especially need for extra labeling and human in the loop. So that's fine. Let's explore that technique. It can be relevant for complex problems. So when it's very complex, it's difficult to annotate. So better maybe to work from the raw data themselves. But if we go for active learning, that requires a learning period. So we'll see the system might not be available immediately. You need to adapt. And as such, there is also a trade-off between adaptation and generalization. So we would like to adapt to new changing conditions, but we do not would like to forget what we have learned neither. So we would like to generalize, to consolidate knowledge versus also adapt to new changing conditions. So that's fine. If we enter some feedbacks or some human in the loop in that active learning process for another problem, why not? But again, it may depend on the quality of the injected feedback. If there are errors or mistakes that get injected on the fly, the system will take them directly and will adapt to these mistakes. Not always good, and that may limit the capabilities, or we will need to put extra effort for the control capabilities. The coverage of the problem may be limited as well because it's only based on observation. And as such, the ML system may not be plug and play, so not available immediately. It will require a period to get trained. That period may be long, and the control can be quite limited as well. Third option, software simulator. So if you would like to build a simulator of anything, it will require a domain theory. So require an implementation of a domain theory. And that can be already quite complex. If you would like to simulate weather, it's complex to simulate all of that. And it may require a very heavy, at least large, computational power. Also, it produces usually ideal example, very smooth, perfect worlds, simulated worlds. So not always matching the field reality. But it has the advantage that when you simulate, you have exactly the nice and exact labeling. You know what you have generated. You know all the characteristics. All of that may be helpful for labeling, and it's correct. So no subjective bias introduced here. The coverage can be very wide. You can simulate or even explore things that are not always observed in practice. You can push the boundaries further. So that's not bad. And it offers some control capabilities. I mentioned the balancing between examples. Here, we can nicely balance in order to simulate cases that are not always present, but that we would like to emphasize. And it allows to have a deep pre-training. So at the end, your robots can be pre-trained and you will not wait for a very long period before they are ready to work. So it's an enabler actually, the simulator are an enabler for plug and play system. And the coverage is quite good, but linked still to what you are able to simulate. And when we work only on simulated data, it may present a severe lack of robustness because it's too perfect example, maybe sometimes far from the reality. Option 4, data strategy algorithmically created. So in that case, you don't have a full knowledge of the theory, and the theory might be very complex, but that do not prevent to just simulate algorithmically some patterns, some rules that works or that are observed in practice. So for example, the traffic simulator, we can have just some simple rules to make car moving and stopping, and you don't need to have all the explanation of the wind and all the theory behind that, just to have algorithmically some simulator that works. Anyway, it's still difficult to reproduce all aspects, but that's okay. And still requiring in simulation huge computational power. Now, it's not a complete theoretical simulator, so it's difficult to have all the characteristics because not everything might be understood, but you still have some ability to provide some degrees of labeling, and that labeling still is not subjective, so it's usually reliable and unbiased. And it allows, as for simulator, quite a large coverage of the problem and some control capabilities, allowing even a pre-training. So in the same way as for simulation based on theory, algorithmically, it helps to have a system that is pre-trained, so more or less plug and play. The coverage is quite good. I've explored a lot of cases, but it may not allow to reach the root causes of the problem because you have not the understanding the theory behind that. Finally, semi-supervised or GAN approach. So nice capacity to create with GAN realistic-like example, fine. No need for a huge effort from the theory, nor for the labeling. And that may also allow a pre-training of the system. But still it requires large computational power. It requires some examples. So it's a bit chicken and egg. You will need also some example to train your GAN that will be able to produce other example to train your ML system. So there still some data are needed. And usually what is generated is without all the characteristics. So there it mimics very well the reality, but you, for example, in this case, do not know the size of the eyes, the ears, what are the different colors here and there. It's without the characteristics. So it's also an enabler as for simulation for plug and play system, but there is a presence of two ML systems. So data will also need to be trained for the, will be required for the GAN system. And finally, the coverage is linked to this initial data set. If the data set that has been used initially to train the GAN is biased or is not complete enough, what you will produce will not be complete enough. Finally, your subsequent ML system will not be covering all the problematic. And as there is not all the characteristics, usually it's not enabling an access to the root causes. We don't have all the characteristics. So that's nice. It's a tour on the various data strategy that we can have. Now, what do we do with that? And I have chosen just a simple example on what we work in these days. So COVID-19, we work at home. Today, if the connection works, it's because you have an access network. Access network, you need to provision it correctly, troubleshoot if there are issues, optimize to make the service better, and offer a maintenance, changing the technology over time. So big operator in the world, service provider, has to do this task. Now, this is quite complex. So even if we work on wireline access network and even your DSL copper pair, the physics of that medium is difficult. The data that are produced are complex. The technology as well, there are plenty of mechanisms, is not easy. And there is various amount of parameter, a lot of parameter that can be tuned. So finally, this telecom system, it's kind of not easy, quite difficult. So we would like to leverage AI in order to help on these aspects. And AI is used mainly to process these complex signals or this large amount of data. It helps to extract, derive, or even synthesize some curves, some quantities, a bit like the paintings. We can derive complex model as well between the data in order to explain the cause or some other aspects. And finally, we would like to access the cause, finding the cause of the problem with high reliability. If you need to act on a line, if there is a problem, we would like to know what's the cause of the problem in order to take the appropriate action. So finally, AI and this business, it's an enabler for an automated, efficient, and accurate process at scale. So what do we do in my team? We have a software that goes on top of a network. In that software, we process complex data. We build deep learning-based system. And the goal on this use case is, for example, to troubleshoot the problematic line. So if your internet connection is not working well, why? And then what needs to be improved or solved automatically or using a technicians and a truck roll. So just to illustrate, without redoing a lecture on telecommunication engineering, your modem, your internet connection today exchange some data with the cabinet in the street. And these data, and you can look at them, it's, for example, the channel frequency response of your line. This curve is finally made of dips, waves, peaks, and a human cannot really process that. So it's a kind of difficult for a human to link this pattern to the cause of the problem. So we would like to help any technicians, any operator in processing this data in order to find the cause of the problem. So it's a nice signal processing use case, let's say. And the goal is to return a lot of insight from that curve. And when we look at this curve like that, there is actually a signature of an internet connection which is affecting. So the services is not good, but we can recognize why it's affected. And it's because there are presence of wiring impairment. This case is called bridge tap. This piece of extra cable that are in the street of at home reduce your services. All that information can be derived from the curve. Now, that system, a deep learning-based system made of convolutional neural networks, of course, to be designed, needs some ML theory. You need to know what to do, how to train that, etc. We use in parallel training. There are plenty of innovation also in order to optimize the hyperparameter tuning using some on-made genetic algorithm or whatever. So that's fine. That's all the machine learning aspect. But as I said from the beginning of this talk, the data are the key. And to train that system, the data are complex. We cannot have annotated data because it's a telecom signal that are not so easily annotated. There are plenty of options. And actually, we have used a mix of all the strategy that I described above in order to produce the dataset. If you go only for a domain or a theoretical simulator, that will be too perfect, that will not fly. But you will have annotated correctly data. If you go only for field data, you will have realistic example, but they will not be annotated. If you would like to refine by algorithmics aspect, that's also fine because we can inject some knowledge that were not probably present on simulated data. And we can also leverage a few real world data in order to make all the set more realistic. So at the end, it's a mix, a piece of everything that allow to produce a data set which is huge, that contains a nice variety with an exact labeling. It looks realistic and it's even augmented, so we can even mimic the corruption or the distortion or whatever. And at the end, from this data set, according to the business need, we can create our targets. And at the end, that produce the core training set from which our deep learning based system is going to learn from. And at the end, when you do that, you have a system that is plug and play, so immediately available, working for any networks, very large coverage, high accuracy, and even field-proven robustness. It's controllable. We can rebalance the data set in order to adjust the system if needed. It embeds the expertise. It's a mix of all these aspects, including our knowledge on the domain and on the theory. And you can even have it available prior to tech deployment. If you would like to design a system for new technologies, imagine 5G or whatever, it's not yet massively deployed, but we can already provide a system that is trained, working, and that will be available, not waiting for this massive field deployment. Now you saw that picture of having cascading neural networks. Actually, it's also an illustration that machine learning is like teaching machine. When you read one book, it may help to read another book because you have already information that are valuable and facilitate the understanding of the second book. Same for the machine. Having a model that predict quantities that are normally relevant for a domain or in the field may help finally to train a second model by injecting these quantities in it. So the second model can benefit from the outputs of the first model. It's injected via the scalar feature, for example. And in that case, instead of having a very big model that try to learn everything and that try to predict very complex things, and probably is going to be difficult, probably it will not be robust or accurate, better to have cascading models. And using cascading model, the output of one are actually adding value to the second one. And it's like when you go at school, you learn first a matter and then it helps to learn a second one, the same. Back to a story, what we have worked, so what I presented works. So finally we have had that strategy that is a mix of simulation, algorithm, field data, etc. It works in our system. That system is now live in production at operator. We had very good validation campaigns. It brings a lot of value. For you and me, what does it mean in this COVID-19 time that if you have issues, that system monitor all the internet connection with very high reliability. So if you have an issue, the time to resolution to resolve it will really be improved. So a gain for the operator, but a gain for you and me. And the staff, even the staff, the technician, their help. No AI have not taken their jobs. They are happy to have such system in their hand. They are augmented, and now they are even the best supporter of our system. So AI for good. AI helps also you, me, but also the operator and the technicians in that case. So that's it. Last slide. AI in this business, there are plenty of aspects. In half an hour, I have not time to cover other use case, but for the troubleshooting aspect, the one I mentioned, it has dramatically simplified the process. All these difficult data are now processed by our system. The technicians are really augmented. It's cost effective at the end for the operator. So less trial and error, less here and there intervention that are useless. Our system guide them very well. And for you and me, it's fast. They take correctly the first action right, and our service is restored back as fast as possible. So thanks a lot. Waiting for your questions now.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Very interesting talk. I had written down a lot of questions actually, but then you answered everything while you were talking, especially on which strategies you are using together. So I'll just jump to the questions that we have from the audience. So Peter is asking, there is a large amount of unlabeled and noisy data. Is it possible to have a general algorithm or AI which can clean the data for us?
Actually, we have used the opposite strategy. So that's funny, but usually we would like to denoise data in order to train our system with probably more smooth data, or because we have trained our system with smooth data, you would like to denoise them in order to pass that to the system and pass data that are closer from the training set that the system has used. We choose the opposite option of degrading the data, what we call augmenting the data. So we degrade, so we had not smooth data, it was more than smooth, it was less smooth, but realistic like data, but we add some degradation. And the reason to do that is to avoid one extra model. If you train your system with degraded data, it will be ready to accept degraded data. So directly, it will work on this real world degraded data and be able to be robust to that and to predict and to adapt according to that. While if we had used normal, smooth, let's say, data for training, of course, you need an extra model to try to denoise the data that you pass. So you need to add that extra model for the denoising. And actually, to train that extra model for the denoising, you will need to produce a data set that has normal and noisy data. So finally, you will have to create this noisy versus unnoisy data to train that. But as you have to create this noisy versus unnoisy, why not directly use that for training the initial core system? So actually, a long explanation, but I will, in short, denoising data require that extra system for denoising. You have the data to train that extra system, so why not training directly your initial normal system with this data?
Very interesting, interesting approach. Before I move to the second question, I'm just reminding the audience here that please go to the poll tab that you can see on your right and give some feedback about the talk, the content, the presentation, just some overall feedback. That will be very helpful for us and the presenter as well. So I will move to the second question. From Celia, how do you measure the relevance of the different data strategies based on real life cases and feedback from operators, simulations?
Yes, so if you use, so as I said, the various strategies has their bias. So if you use the first one, annotating data, for example, for reconfiguring a network, you can use existing network data. And then you annotate, and then you can have an accuracy of 95% because you have well reconfigured. But actually, if your network has never experienced a good provisioning, a good configuration, that field data, that live data do not even exist, the optimal one. You have only observation of the existing configuration that are deployed, but never the optimal one, which has never been applied live. So if you validate just in terms of accuracy, with this strategy, you can reach 95% fine. And then you use maybe simulations that are more complete, that address maybe corner cases or even more optimal situation that has never been deployed. There, maybe you will reach 90% or 85%. So apparently it looks like your accuracy even is lower, 90, 85 versus 95 in the first strategy. So if you compare the accuracy, you seem to have something which is working less good. But actually, because you have a more complete coverage, you have explored cases that has never been explored, proposition of configuration that do not exist, it's even better, but that is not reflected in terms of your accuracy. So in order to measure that, we need to go live and see the macroscopic, for example, benefits. And if you look in my use case here, troubleshooting, if you explore just an initial strategy, fine, to identify maybe 1, 2, 3 problems. We were very high in accuracy, always saying that problem, we are sure it's there, it's that, always correct, fine, 100% even for 1, 2 problem. And now we deploy the new one, but the new one can identify 20 problem. There, sometimes we are wrong, but it's on 20 problem. So, okay, 95, it's still good, but you extend it a lot, the capabilities. So in order to assess at the end the benefits, you need to go to the field and talk with the user of your system. So do not stick to the accuracy, talk with at the end the user of the system, go to the field, see the field reality. So as I said, it's easy to have high accuracy, but it's not easy to have your rover on Mars. So it's not easy to have your system that works in production, give value and address all the corner cases. But it's that to assess the value, we need to really talk with at the end or having some measurement of the field reality and see if it brings value extra. And sometimes increasing the coverage of the problem for the same or a slightly lower accuracy, it's better.
Great. Thanks for your answer. Let's move to the last question from today from Attila. I will read only the first one because I see there is a lot of explanation here. So Attila says, if my understanding is correct, you have a set of tools for various types of failures, just like a cable cut localizator. But how do you decide which elements to choose from the toolset if you're not directly monitoring cables individually, but some more complex system performance?
So we are monitoring any connection. So the tool, it's a software on top of a network, so access network in this case, wireline DSL network, for example. Any modem measure data. We retrieve these data in a software that is on top of your network for any internet link, so any internet connection. And we process these data and then we return some outputs. And in this case, that use case, the output is we have found that there are problems, issue on your line, and this is exactly the problem. So we find the cause of the problem, and then you advise about an action in order to solve that that cause. So yes, there is any link that is monitored, and yes, we try to find the cause or detect the issue that are impacting any internet connection.